Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Marketplace Forum. I am your host, Sam Corsi. Haven't been with you for a few sessions, but it's great to be back. I've got some great guests today, friends in the kingdom, um, Taryn Hinton and Chris Lunt. And tonight we are talking about When Helping Hurts, Kingdom Social Responsibility. And really, we're hoping that we can help you as marketplace ministers to develop a passion for social justice. We can help you as marketplace ministers to advance social justice in your organization and in your personal lives. So I'm very excited about that. Um, and when we started these marketplace forums at the height of the lockdown, we sensed God saying it's time to do different business differently. It's time to build sheep nations, caring nations where all can prosper. And it's really time to take on the spirit of greed and corruption and replace it with that caring and sharing way of doing business. And so we hope that tonight will be both an encouragement, an educational process. It's certainly been that for me in preparation for tonight. And hoping that we can build passion for bringing social justice into our marketplace. Such a privilege for me to have Taryn Hinton with me. Taryn is a long-standing friend. I remember the days when we were in the same Connect group many years ago when we were all single still and no kids. um, but apart from being a former cell group member of mine, Taryn is a lawyer who started off in the commercial sector at Bowman's before moving across to the non-profit environment as a consultant. First in Meadowlands, Soweto, as a SAPS and community in the SAPS and Community Initiative, and then administering the Umbono Inhlaganipo Education Trust, the IED. And she then established BE trusts that this is an established BE trust that funds talented black learners at excellent schools around South Africa, utilizing dividends. Taryn is passionate about mentoring children, youth, and young women. She was also specialized in setting up local community trusts as part of the government's Renewable Energy IPP program, and she currently serves as the chairperson of the Maltino and Sterksturm Community Development Trusts and is a director of the Dorper Wind Farm, a 100 megawatt wind farm in the Eastern Cape. Taryn also consults to Media Monitoring Africa, which is a human rights based media watchdog, and is a legal advisor to PrayCelt.org, a leading mobile health nonprofit company that recently developed and rolled out the COVID-19 WhatsApp bot and helpline for the World Health Organization and the SA National Department of Health. And Taryn is happily married to Michael, and they have two beautiful children, Kelly, aged 10, and David, aged 9. Welcome, Taryn. So good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
It's a pleasure. Then let me introduce Chris. Chris has been married to Catherine for the last 24 years. Amazing. They have 4 kids: Rebecca, Dominic, Amahle, and Georgia. And Chris has been a member of Every Nation Rosebank since 1999 and serves as chairperson of Every Nation Financial Advisory Board. Chris, you beat me by 2 years. Jolly and I joined Every Nation Rosebank in 2001. So we've had long-standing friendships. Chris is also director and CFO at Madula Moho Housing Association, which is a non-profit company that has operated as a social housing company since 2005. And I found this amazing. During this time, their turnover has increased from 200,000 per annum to 65 million per annum and has assets of 600 million rand. Fantastic. Chris has always been passionate about the city of Joburg, developing housing solutions for its poorer residents, and has a vision for slaying the giant of homelessness. His passion is fueled by his desire for social justice, using the skills he has developed as an administrator and accountant. HR and compliance expert Chris has pioneered different housing solutions, namely transitional housing, communal, and social housing, with some great results. He is currently of the view that once we start collaborating and our communities become more inclusionary, then we can start to slay the giant of homelessness. That's really fantastic. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Sam. Nice to be here.
Great. And before we get into our discussion with our two guests, big thanks to Dorian Wrigley, our leader at Marketplace Forum, but also in the background on YouTube, along with Dave Porter. And please, as always, pop your questions and your comments in the chat section. Dave and Dorian are there to pick up your questions, and Dorian will be handling our Q&A session at about 8:45. And Charles Hellier in the background, as always, making sure that all of this works smoothly. We don't quite know what buttons he's pressing, but he keeps pressing them well, and we keep giving you a great episode every time we're on. So thank you, Charles, for all that you do. Taryn, I want to start with you. I mean, cum laude at university for your law degree, getting into Bowman's, fantastic law firm, and then jumping ship to get into to the NGO sector. That must have been quite a journey. Can you tell us a little bit about how that process happened, and what were you thinking, and just how you were processing that with the Lord?
Thank you. It's an interesting one because from the moment I can remember, I always wanted to do law. But really, law was more a means to an end. And the challenge is that being a very A-type personality, I had it all planned out. I knew how many A's I needed in matric, which university I wanted to go to, which law firms I wanted to be in. And it was great. It was going fantastic. It was all going again according to Plan Taryn. The problem was that I was kind of tagging God along with me, and he seemed to be agreeing. It was all going really well. He was on my page, but I got to the point where I was a senior associate at Bowman's, and I really had to start thinking about a partnership track. But I'd never done anything else. And I started praying. I was like, Lord, how is this where you want me? This is always what I've wanted to do, but is this where you want me? And for 6 months, I heard him say to me, leave your job. I was like, no, really? I've worked so hard to get here. Why would I do that? But I did know that my passion and my heart was for change, and change at grassroots level, and engaging communities and using my skill set to make a difference and impact. Mm-hmm. And so after 6 months of hearing the same message, I left my job. And about a week later, I had actually been doing pro bono work at that time. And a week later, one of my pro bono clients, who was based in Meadowland, Soweto, had heard that I'd left, phoned me up and said, hey, we heard you left. Would you like to come consult? Really work for free, let's be honest. So I did. And it was quite funny at that stage, because at that stage, I was living in an apartment in Sandton and traveling every day to Soweto, which was an unusual occurrence because most people were traveling the other way to get into Sandton. About 2 weeks later, I got approached by my current colleague and boss, William Bird at Media Monitoring Africa. He said to me, oh, heard you left Bowman's. Do you want to start consulting? So really, I think what I'd like to say about that is God sees more. He's got a bigger plan. He knows what he wants to do with your skill set, where he needs you and what he wants you to do. And sometimes we just have to keep quiet and listen and be obedient.
Sure. That's so great. That's so great, Taryn. And maybe to just carry on from that, I know that, one of your passions is about using the skills that's in our hands as professionals, as marketplace ministers, as entrepreneurs, really, whoever's watching tonight, that God can really use that to make a difference in the world. And one of the great stories that you've got for us is just about the Eastern Cape kind of community building that you've been involved in at the grassroots level, and some challenges that you had with that project. Do you want to just unpack that a bit for us?
Yes. First, I want to encourage everyone who's on this platform to understand that by engaging in social justice and social development, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you are going to go do a degree in social development. You're going to suddenly throw in everything you've worked so hard to do, your business, the opportunities that have been given to you. It's more about saying what is in your hands, what skill set do you have, and are you using that to the best of your ability? So my skill set in my hands was law and the ability to engage and to communicate in that space. So even when I started working in the REAP projects and working as the chairperson of this local community trust, how I got involved with that was I started drafting these trust deeds. And I started working in that sector, in the alternative energy sector. And then because of my work in that area, and because of my passion and my heart to be more than a lawyer, because my aim is not just to do the paperwork, it's to actually get involved in the change, I was asked to be the chairperson of this local community trust. Now, what's interesting about a community trust is that you represent the rights and the community itself, the assets, everything belongs to them. You are just in a fiduciary duty towards them. And I recall very clearly a very good lesson that I learned was I went through to the Eastern Cape to an AGM. And we had done extensive community engagement to determine what projects were needed. And one of the projects that we wanted to do was a ECD, early childhood development feeding project across both communities, feeding approximately 1,300 children, 2 meals a day, 5 days a week across 23 early childhood development centers. And so we went into these communities just to confirm that this is what we wanted. But unfortunately, and what tends to happen quite often, and perhaps you've seen this in your business, is that the loudest voices are heard. And that is where we lose track of what is really needed in our businesses, how to look after our people, how to engage. And what happened at these community meetings was that the local business forum leaders, who were very strong vocal men, decided that this was definitely not how they wanted to spend the money. And in fact, they had their own agenda. And they were pushing this hard. But what was really powerful is that granny and gogo after gogo, mom, aunt stood up and said, no, we vote for our children. We vote for change. We vote for full tummies, children who can learn, engaging at ECD level. And they were heard, not because they were the loudest voices, but because they were persistent, but because we chose to listen. So I think the one lesson I learned is that sometimes it's more important to listen than to speak, and not just to listen to those voices that are shouting the loudest, to listen to all the stakeholders, and to really understand who is in your community and who are you serving and who should you be listening to.
That's so great, Taryn. And I think what inspires me about your story is how you've been able to bring your professional skills to bear. You've been able to still run a consultancy, but a consultancy that helps with social justice. I mean, some of your projects on the Education Development Trust, seeing how the alumni has grown, and the alumni is now mentoring young learners and educating them, raising funds, even your COVID-19 WhatsApp bots. I mean, that's been just fantastic seeing that rolled out. And just for the audience out there, one of the things that, Taryn really wanted to drive home is, what do we all have in our space that we can actually use in the social development space? I'm going to jump over to Chris now. Chris has just also got a great story just about, finishing an accounting degree and not going to work for an accounting firm. Chris, do you want to tell us about your journey over the last couple of decades?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thanks, Sam. So yeah, my father was a chartered accountant, and I know he had a deep desire for me to follow in his footsteps, but I chose a different path, and at the time it didn't make sense. but I think it's started to make a little bit more sense, in the recent past. But I think for me, what changed was just, reading the Word of God. One day I read Matthew 25, verse 35, which is the parable of the sheep and the goats. And it just absolutely floored me, where God is talking about, have you taken care of the poor? And, what are you going to do one day when you stand before me? So I think my story is about, a faith story in the sense that it started a few weeks later. I was driving through Rosebank. I was aware of the homeless people there. There was a soup kitchen that had just started, and I felt the Lord say, well, go and serve, get involved, which is what I did. And I do apologize about my dogs. I felt like I needed to get involved. So from very humble beginnings, working at a soup kitchen, which then we formed a very basic structure. It was a voluntary association, was called the Rosebank Church Forum, which became the Rosebank Home Association. And then a couple of years later, I had an opportunity to run the Johannesburg Trust for the Homeless. My experience, it wasn't perhaps the best form. As trust, I think is a good, Taryn will probably give better legal advice, but I think it's a good structure to raise money, but not necessarily the best for running a business. That was my experience. But that first 10 years was quite, we made some progress. I guess my passion was very, I was very passionate about what I wanted to do. I wanted to help the homeless. The focus started evolving, what I wanted to do, and the structure evolved. But what really changed was after really quite an intense year, 2005, where it looked like everything had fallen apart. The plan that I had for my life looked like it was going to collapse. And I think God sometimes uses turmoil to bring about change. And in a long story short, I moved on from the Johannesburg Trust for the Homeless and joined the organization that I'm currently at, which is called Medulla Moore Housing. I've been there for 15 years. I've been the CFO. It's been an incredible journey. We've really seen the Lord's hand. And as you said, in the intro, we started off with one little project in Hillbrow. We now have 10 projects in 3 centers, being Johannesburg in the center. We've got 2 projects on the West Rand and 2 in Cape Town. And I think for me, I think the successes of that have been, number one, is that we had a very clear focus and mandate on what we wanted to do. And that was about creating a housing ladder and allowing people to go up the ladder. So we were providing different products as people moved up. And then also, I think our structure, our form was, as a non-profit, really worked. We've always had a great board. It's been very stable. And, in the last 5-10 years, financially, things have changed. I mean, I think the thing was, we never went in it for the money. We went in it for the passion. And then a lot of those things just followed on. And I think I'm in an exciting place now, Sam, where I'm recognizing that I have different platforms in which I can express my passion for the homeless. I chair a thing called the Johannesburg Homelessness Network. I'm still with Medulla Moore, and Taryn and I are both involved in the, Every Nation Johannesburg Foundation, and I will talk a little bit more about that. But I'm really trusting in the next chapter of my life that God can use all different platforms to make a difference in slaying the giant of homelessness, because that's the thing that's always been my passion from 25, 26 years ago. Thanks, Sam.
Great. No, thanks so much, Chris. And I think again, that ability to build organizations
Mm,
using the skills that we have as
yes.
marketplace ministers to really impact people's lives and and to really just bring social justice, social change into the spaces that God has called us. I think is so
Mm,
inspirational. Um, now, we titled this episode "When Helping Hurts,"
mm.
Kingdom Social Responsibility. And that's a little bit of a strange title around "When Helping Hurts." Do you want to tell us about the book that inspired tonight's title?
Okay, I'm going to show it to you. There's the book. I'm going to have to start with an anecdote, Sam, because you know that your wife started this about 6 months ago. In fact, maybe longer now, pre-COVID, probably February. Jolly had dropped off a copy of this book with my wife, and I took one look at it and said, "I'm reading that first." And it really resonated with me. And I think what I liked about the book is that it's both it's got some strong theology and it's also very practical. Um, I think that Dorian did a excellent job of looking at the theology of it at an earlier episode of the Marketplace Forum, probably a few months ago. But it's about, so there is, in the beginning there's some stuff, some theology, and I guess the most important thing in the theology is that God is going to restore all things in the
Mm,
cosmos, and the word is cosmos. That's all things. It's not just relationships, all things. But when you translate that, it's not just our relationship to God, but it's our relationship to the economy, our relationship to social systems, our relationship to other things, to creation. And I love that. I think if for myself personally, it's given me a fuller revelation of you know uh, what the gospel is. For me, I've always understood the gospel to be two sides. The evangelism, and then the other side is the social side, because when I read the scriptures, there's so much about when Jesus, with his parables and stuff, by reaching out to the poor and helping the poor, the oppressed, the widows, all that stuff. So it starts off on that foundation, but I think it's the title of the book gives it away. It's basically saying that, well, let me first tell you a story. There's a beautiful reference that he does. He talks about a thing called the Great Reversal that happened in the US roughly between 1900 and 1930. Basically, up until that point, this paper that I've read said that the evangelical churches, which is kind of the church that we're part of, they were involved in both evangelism and social justice. But there was, and as you know, the American history, I mean, there were waves of foreigners and that would arriving in the 1800s, whether they were from Ireland or from Europe or whatever. And they were largely absorbed by the church. There was no such thing as a welfare state. It was the church that were absorbing people into communities. But then what is happening, there was the rise of liberalism and social justice, as a form of religion almost in the early 1900s. And the evangelists didn't want to be associated with that, so they started moving away from that. So sadly, 30, 40 years ago, 30, 40 years later, sort of, time of the war, suddenly, the evangelical churches were no longer talking about social justice. So I truly believe that 100 years ago, churches like us had a culture of social justice, but it was sadly lost. And I'd love to see that back in our culture, as a church. And I'm not just talking every nation, I'm talking all churches. And I think that, some churches, express it a bit more. So I think so that's important. And then just the fact that the title talks about the fact that so a lot of churches sort of 20 years ago suddenly got a grasp of this, and we're sending people on short-term missions around the world, but often doing more damage because they'd go for a couple of weeks or a month, do some stuff, and then leave. And I think what the book really goes on to say is, yes, there is a place for mercy ministry, yes, but the true work of churches, and that should be the long, hard graft of doing rehabilitation and development. You want to take people, whether you want to call it mentorship or discipleship, you want to take people who are in a hard place and really, change them. And it takes time and effort. It takes a lot of human resource. It takes a lot of effort. And I think that's what the book's about. It's about focusing on that and then being very practical about that and giving examples of what can be done. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I really enjoyed the book. Yeah. And just, if I may, just as a quick punt to say that we do hope to do this course as a grow course at Every Nation Rosebank in the very near future. Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah, so let's look out for that. Can you give us the details of the book again? You're on mute. It's the 2020 line of the year. You are on mute.
It's called When Helping Hurts. So there's two versions of it. There's the book, and then there's also another version of it which has been designed for small groups, and it has videos attached to it. So it's kind of rehashed this book and made it a practical 6-week course. But more on that later. Watch this space.
Brilliant. Taryn, do you want to I'm gonna ask you two things. The one is, do you want to add any more to your story that maybe I kind of rushed you in? I'm looking at our time and we're doing good for time. But then secondly, for those at home watching us tonight, what are some of the practical things that we can do? Maybe I am, a professional in corporate, and maybe I don't feel God telling me to quit my job, but there's still things I can do around sort of social justice and making a difference in the world.
Great. So you're really interested in how people at home could get involved in this, in this concept and this idea, and making a difference.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking to. Yeah. So I mean, just from our own personal story, I mean, I agree with Chris. I think all of what we do has got to be an outflowing of the talents and purposes and visions that God has placed within you. So you're not going to go and do something totally outside of your scope. Well, maybe you are, and if you're called to do it. But in general, I think it's a bit like I'm really passionate about mentorship. And I believe that everyone should be mentoring. And I spend a lot of time telling people about the fact that they should be mentoring. And what's curious to me is that how often, for example, I'll speak to young Black professional men who were in one of the organizations that I was working with, talking to them about mentoring teenagers. And they were like, me? How could I do it? But it was because they didn't realize in many instances they were already doing it. They were already teenage boys, nephews, neighbors that they were engaging, but they were just not being purposeful about it. And I think it's really important in all that we do that we choose to be purposeful, that we're aware of what God is calling us to do in that space, and that we're aware that those interactions and those engagements can make a difference. We can make a difference in that young man's life who doesn't have anyone talking into his life. And that when we talk to that young man about soccer, we don't just leave it at that. We take him further. We engage him on meaningful issues. So I think that's one thing that people at home can do, is just start seeing yourself differently. Sometimes we see ourselves in these sort of silos of, I'm at work and I'm doing this, and I'm at church, I'm doing this, and I'm a dad. And we don't always realize that, well, women are better than men, let's be honest, that these things all happen together, and we don't engage in straight lines. So it is really important that we just start renewing our minds as to how we engage on these issues firstly. And I think for the people who are listening, people who have their own businesses or who are engaging, the first thing you need to do is think about what's happening in your own organization. I thought it was really apt that Simon Sinek shared yesterday. I follow him on Facebook, and he said, yeah, leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in your charge. He said, being a leader has nothing to do with rank or authority. A leader is someone who embraces the awesome responsibility to see those around them rise. And that's exactly what we're talking about. So within the space and the scope that you are operating, this is before we go even further and we look into other aspects of how we pull people in. Who in your organization may be in a space where they need rehabilitation? They may be, they need more input, they need engagement, they're struggling on certain levels. And if they got some additional soft skills or engagement, they could do better. And who have you found in your organization that you could develop? And what purposeful steps are you taking to develop those individuals? Because all of that is, and whether it's the lady who's cleaning or whoever it happens to be, not just your 2IC that you're grooming to take your place. I mean, are you seeing everyone, every single person, even those quiet voices that make your organization tick? So for me, that is imperative. If we're looking for first steps, are you looking close to home? Are you looking in that scope and in that space? I can carry on going, Sam. Just let me know.
Yeah, so some of the notes that we've got here is around, kind of once you're outside of your organization, there's a lot that we can give as professionals into the NGO space. Do you want to maybe just unpack that as well?
Yes, so I think it's also, again, it comes down to not just seeing yourself as, well, I'm just a business and I do X, Y, and Z, and my contribution to society is I pay salaries. There's opportunities where you can partner with other entities, for example, using your CSI spend, using your ED spend, your SED, all the things that you might have, which is in your hands that you've got. Are you being purposeful on how you're spending your money? Are you actively reaching out? Are we doing what we sometimes do in Joburg is money costs less than time. So we don't actually engage fully on the issue, whereas you could partner with someone. You could have an initiative where you take your organization along with you by partnering with a nonprofit organization who has the skills. So something that you can be passionate about, something that you can grasp hold of as a business to really stand behind and champion. And remember, time is money. So often it's the time investment that is worth a lot. And it means a lot to your staff to see that it's not just about the bottom line as well. So that's one way of engaging. And then, there's further afield that you can look as well. If you want me to go into that space now, I can talk about that.
Well, I was just thinking about, my conversation with you over the weekend around connecting and networking and how you and Mike love to connect people, and it reminded me of a story where Jolly's friend of a friend, the lady lost her husband. The husband was an entrepreneur, and she essentially got locked out of the business bank accounts and such that the family was even struggling to get food. And so when Jolly heard the story, she said, yeah, of course I can help with some food parcels, but let's get to the bottom of this issue with the bank. And Jolly was able to connect them with somebody high up in the bank. And eventually, it took a while, but eventually, 500,000 rands worth of bank debt that had accumulated because of the kind of admin nightmare that they were living through. 500,000 rand of debt was actually written off. And we heard about that about 10 days ago, and I thought that was fantastic. Do you want to say anything else in this space before Chris comes in with kind of partnering with FBOs?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really passionate about that, and I think that's something that everyone can think about doing. Connecting is such an important skill. It really, we talk about white privilege, and what really, on many instances, is white privilege. It's all those connections, those networks, those ability to engage with other people because of your background or where you came from, and that's exactly what we should be doing as business people. We should be connecting. So when someone approaches you and you can't necessarily assist them, often, if you just thought about it, you would be able to put them in contact with someone who can. I often joke that I'm a letter writing lawyer. I will often write letters on behalf of people because they don't necessarily know how to engage in a space, and they aren't per se taken seriously. I don't take it any further. I'm never going to litigate for them. It's not my scope, but I'll write a letter, or I'll engage, I'll make a phone call. And that's exactly what Jolly did. We can all do it. And I think it just takes a little bit of time and just actually hearing what it is. And it's not necessarily about, and this is the very important thing, about owning someone else's problems. People need to deal with the challenges that the consequences of perhaps choices that they've made, but we can come alongside them and give them direction and assist them and focus them and give them opportunities. And that's also part of upskilling people, is to point them in the right direction, direct them, whatever that happens to be, guide them, mentor them, focus them.
So great, so great. Yeah, and some of the one of the things that you also shared with the group over the weekend was this whole idea of jobs for life training, and I thought that was just a great kind of way of thinking about it. Again, and this touches also on some of what Chris mentioned about, it's not just going in there for 10 days. Painting a school on Nelson Mandela Day, getting your warm and fuzzy feeling, and then leaving. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about some of the jobs for life training that the book talked about, which I thought was great.
Yeah, I think it's a really great skill, and it's a program that's been running, and they speak about in the book. But really, this concept of connecting people. So first, looking at individuals and saying, well, you know what, I might not have a position for you, but I can assist you, give you kind of classroom learning. I can help you with all the things that we speak about when we talk about Tandanani, CV writing, the skills that the Malibongwe women get when they're engaged. It's ways to help you to be able to access mainstream society, to be able to access jobs, to be able to understand etiquette and to engage, like your soft skills. So really, within the business scope, often there's an opportunity to do that, to take people in, do an internship, just give them those skills that they perhaps wouldn't know. What's the right protocol, etiquette when you meet people in a business context? How do you engage on that? And then also just taking it further, there might be opportunities to mentor within the scope, as we spoke about. And that's what this Jobs for Life program is. It's a multifaceted, multi-tiered program, which takes people from one end where they're poor, they're on the street, and perhaps not even on the street, they're just destitute and they don't have a job, to the space where they are become employable. You may not be able to employ them, but you are taking them along a path where they become employable because they have the soft skills, they've got the etiquette, and they've had the mentoring. And then there may be an opportunity to give them a space in your organization as well, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, what is interesting for me is, they talk about, they can teach everybody the soft skills, CV writing, networking, how to engage in a business process and in a business environment. And it's quite an intensive thing, right? Because I think they're meeting daily with the guys, classes and mentoring for 90 days. And then they also then help them connect with people who can give them the hard skills. So you've got the soft skills and the hard skills. And this, the hard skills may be, basic bookkeeping or, hotel management skills and that kind of thing. And they've been quite successful at placing people in permanent jobs after these programs. But I think my takeaway is exactly what Chris was talking about, is that, it can't be a a 10-day or a 1-day Nelson Mandela Day kind of, intervention in and out, because that really doesn't change things in the long term. I think one of the organizations I'm involved in, we raised some COVID funds, and we were helping out a school with some repairs and maintenance. And we were just discussing last week that, maybe let's develop a much broader relationship with the school. Is there work that we can do with the learners, with the staff, with the teachers, that can actually become a much longer term, sustainable program where we actually making some long-term difference. So very, very exciting, very exciting. And Taryn, maybe you can also then take this moment to introduce us to some of the exciting developments at Every Nation around the foundation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited about that. Chris and I are both thrilled. So we have a trust that is currently being constituted that is a great vehicle to assist businesses and, in fact, just about any entity who would want to engage. Now, this is a trust that was previously assisting the Havens and was in the scope of assisting the Havens to raise money and was kind of their legal entity that was they were utilizing. But this trust is so much more, and it has such great capacity because it not only allows us to raise funds, but it allows us to raise them across platforms. So in other words, it's not just limited to assisting children and orphans to be placed. This trust is called the Every Nation Johannesburg Trust. And we are currently engaging to see how we can capacitate that and use that to assist in helping businesses to use it to get Section 18A funding. So really what it is it's already a registered public benefit organization, meaning that it is a tax exempt organization and it has the ability to issue Section 18A certificates. And it does mean that you can run initiatives, business forum initiatives through this trust and get a tax benefit for it. And those initiatives include things like entrepreneurship development of youth, creation of jobs, anything from the promotion of adult literacy, rehabilitation, civic projects. So in other words, it's this great vehicle that allows a lot of flexibility. So it means that we don't just have to talk, we can actually walk the walk, and you can get the benefit for doing it as well from a tax point of view, as well as from a governance point of view.
That's so great. That's so great. And Chris, I know you wanted to also tell us a little bit more about this Every Nation Johannesburg Trust.
Absolutely. Just for correction, Every Nation Johannesburg Foundation, but it's the same thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Chris.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I'm just, Tara and I are both just passionate about the fact that we have this great vehicle. We have a church of, north of 1,500 adults. That's just at Rosebank. And of course, as you know, we have, I think, more than 10 services around the city every Sunday. So I don't know what the total numbers are, but I would imagine it's north of 3,000 that meet on a Sunday. And just believe that, I'd love to see more people involved. I think I mentioned earlier that, sometimes when you go through a crisis, it shakes things up and opens people's eyes. And, COVID-19 certainly fits the mold. And I mean, we've seen something really beautiful happen at Every Nation Rosebank with the CRT, the crisis response team. Something that I was involved in, but in a very small way and behind the scenes. But I saw how in the first couple of weeks it was like, 10 Rand donation and 50 Rand donation and a couple of bean bags, to, a situation where 2-3 months later, I mean, people were queuing to help. Brian Glover did a magnificent job in, getting everybody together and working. And at the end of the day, I mean, Dave Porter, who's in the background there, you probably have the numbers better, but certainly there are hundreds of people being helped every week, you know, in the form of food parcels or food vouchers. We were moving more towards food vouchers at the end in the recent past. But an even more beautiful thing has happened is that on the Wednesday one, we started attracting a lot of homeless people and people living on the street. And Pastor Tiam he's in the process of starting effectively some home groups, has been doing so for a couple of months, and there's talk of starting a church. So, yeah, not your regular conventional way of planting a church, but it just shows that you can use social justice to plant a church, just saying. So I think it's a very beautiful picture of that. The same with a project that I've been involved in for many years, which we've called Transformation Vredendorp. A few of my buddies were running through past Vredendorp one day. Noticed there were lots of kids running around and that sort of thing. Jonathan Party being one of them. And yeah, a few of us in our men's prayer meeting on a Wednesday morning, we started talking about it, praying about it. And long story short, 7 years ago, Pastor Jonathan planted the starting of a church, but effectively it was getting young kids together from that community. It's a very poor, impoverished community. On a Tuesday afternoon, it then expanded, so it was kind of like a kids ministry, and then it expanded into an education program on a Wednesday and a Thursday. And here we are, several years later. We actually have a house in that community that belongs to the foundation, fully paid for. That house is now utilized as a library. Kids can go there anytime. So it's a full-on education program, and there is talk, or there is a real possibility of a church plant in the area in time to come. So that's really exciting. And then, of course, the foundation has this amazing Havens program with Dave and Caroline. I think the numbers, they've had more than 200 kids who've been adopted, which is just remarkable. And we've got the Malibongwe program that's already been mentioned. I'd love to see that go from strength to strength. And there is already an interesting financing thing happening there, where I think they get dividends from a company to fund it. But I would love to see more people at Every Nation aware of all these amazing programs that are happening and be getting involved. And I think the last one that I want to talk about is the Tandanani project. Charlie is an amazing man. He himself was once homeless. I think he's been doing this for 6 or 7 years, just discipling the guys. I think there's always been a desire to do something more, to see if we could provide accommodation for these guys. And we are currently piloting a project called Kala Kabusha, which apparently in Zulu means a fresh start, which is lovely. And we are partnering with Fountains for the Thirsty, and we have a house in Begari. And there were 8 guys who went through the first course, of which 2 were from Every Nation Rosebank. And of the 5 who finished the 3 months, they all got jobs, which is amazing. And we've now sent another 2 guys. One's already there, and the second 3-month program has just started. So we're pioneering something, because we believe that if you want to get someone off the street, it's not just you're not just providing a house. There has to be, like we've talked about earlier, being intentional and deliberate, and have a program, and really help people just come alive again, and that sort of thing. So So pretty excited about that. And love to see the foundation grow from strength to strength in the years to come.
So great, so great.
Mm.
Dorian, bro, it's 10 minutes to 9. The three of us still have a lot more to talk about that we'd love to touch on, but we want to give the audience some chance to give us some feedback. So, do we have any comments or questions that you'd like to highlight from the audience back on YouTube?
Well, thank you, Sam. Guys, just to say that I think it's been quite profound. The comments on the back end, Pastor Simon Narafolo just going, Chris, Chris, you, Taryn, both you guys are heroes. We just really love what you guys are doing. Just really clarifying that the full gospel of the kingdom is about both church planting, evangelism, as well as social justice. So I think just generally all around, there's just that, wow, this is great. I've got two specific questions that I'll just leave with you, Sam, and then you can decide how you want to wrap them up. But the one was for you, Taryn, and I'm going to give both questions whilst you think about it. Taryn Lumley, boy, who's a great friend and a great kind of part of our ministry and church, would like to know from you, what are the critical things that make trusts work and sustainable? Because there's a lot of people try and put these things together, but they just don't work, or they're just not sustainable. And then Chris, for you, Ian Erasmus says, listen, we got a big challenge with youth, townships, just in South Africa. What are some of the things that we can do to really bring about breakthrough with this youth challenge in Southern Africa? And then Sam, one maybe for you to think about, which is, as corporate South Africa, it's one thing partnering with NGOs, but is there more that we can do as corporates? With the JSE, what is it that we could look at for businesses to do? So I'm going to go dark again, unless there's any real burning questions in the background, and I'm going to let you guys wrap up.
Thanks, Dorian. Taryn, over to you.
Great, thank you. So, of course, I have to talk about the legal aspects of it. There are more than one type of entity that you can use, with trust providing sort of a medium amount of protection and non-profit companies providing more protection. But really, one must understand with trusts, you're only as strong as, firstly, your trustees are. So you need to ensure that you've got really good governance documents. How is your trust constituted? If it's a BEE trust, are you complying with what you're required to do, for example? Are you ensuring that you are giving adequate voting rights and engagement to your beneficiaries? And do you know that you are acting in the best interest? You need to be acting in the best interest of your beneficiaries at all times. So in other words, have you got the right trustees on your board? It's no good to just have really fancy people with big names. You want people who are willing to engage and meaningfully engage in the matter. But more than that, it's also very important to understand what is behind the trust, what is the basis, and what is the purpose of it. So, for example, if it's a BEE trust and it's a vehicle that a corporate is using to obtain BEE points at at a shareholders level, ownership points, is there a good flow of dividends that is coming through to the trust to help ensure its sustainability? Have you ensured that it's been registered as a PBO to maximize your ability to attract perhaps outside investors who want to get involved, who want to invest, but who also want to get Section 18A certificates and some rebates for giving their money into the entity? Or for example, in the REAP project, what projects and programs, what's so amazing about those is that they're specifically linked to the project companies, and the dividends that flow through from selling the energy into Eskom then flow directly into the trust. So it's just to obviously make sure there's excellent corporate governance, because in some instances there's large amounts of money flowing, and you need to make sure the money is going where it's supposed to be going. So there's a whole lot of things that you need to take into consideration when looking at trusts. But hopefully that leaves you with some things to think about when you are thinking about establishing a trust, how best to do that, and above all, make sure you have the right people on your board of trustees, and also don't forget that you are serving the beneficiaries.
So great. Thank you, Taryn. Chris, thoughts on your side around youth?
Yeah, thanks for that really simple question. Should be done in about 10 seconds. No, I mean that's a massive challenge that faces us. Obviously the youth is the future, and there's so many challenges that we face in terms of education and or lack of poor education that people face, and then the lack of jobs. So, I mean, but rather than feeling sorry for ourselves, I think I'd like to turn this thing on the head and say, okay, what if we often look to government to provide the answer. They must come up with the funding to fix this problem, and it's a multifaceted problem. And I just think that maybe we should do things a little bit differently. Um, I have a philosophy that I've been developing over the last 2 years, which is to say that rather look at big government, why doesn't each community look at its own needs, and become more inclusionary? And I've coined this frame called an inclusionary neighborhood. So instead of going, oh my goodness, we have, I think the numbers are staggering. Was it like 30% unemployment? Okay, that was a week ago. I don't know about on Friday. Friday apparently it changed, but it's a very high number. And then amongst the youth, it's possibly even as high as 50%. But what if we rather try to say, okay, in my community, what can I control? Because I know that's a challenge for me to say, how many people in my suburb are homeless, and what can I do to help them? Because sometimes you'd be surprised that there are possibly 10 or 20 people living in my community in a park. And I think the same could be said for if you knew of some young people who are out of school, struggling to find work. What if you reached out to one of them in your community to see how you could uplift them? So you go on a journey with them. It might be a 6-month journey, a year journey. It might be several years journey. I know in my organization, what has been a great joy is doing learnerships in the last few years. Learnerships with young people, giving bursaries to young people. And I think that that can be done now in the business environment. In fact, the BEE legislation encourages that stuff. So that's one channel. Another channel is, like I say, just within your suburb, like in my suburb, to say, okay, if you knew of people. So if you have a whole bunch of suburbs or townships or people who can helping one or two people, I think it actually makes a big difference over time, rather than always relying on government. So that's my first attempt to answer that massive question. Thanks, Sam.
No, great. I think that's definitely been a theme tonight to say, I as an individual, there's different things I can do. Us as an organization, where can we go in? And maybe to just touch on Dorian's question around corporates. From a corporate perspective, from a JSE perspective, let me talk about my employer. Obviously we've got all the kind of social responsibility stuff that we're doing, like in the education space, running the share trading competition with learners from all over the country, etc. But in terms of our ecosystem and our investors, we're looking to get the financial services industry to funnel more funds into sustainability. So, we've got green bonds, we've got project bonds for infrastructure, we've got a sustainability section that we're putting up. So really what we're saying is, we have a strong savings industry in South Africa, worth trillions of rands. Can we get more and more of it to go into kind of social infrastructure, hard infrastructure like electricity and water provision and transport? Can we get it into some of the trusts and CSR projects that you've been talking about, Taryn. So I think that certainly as corporates, we need to be looking and seeing where we can do more of that. And then as individuals, I think we can, waking up tomorrow and heading to the office or heading into your study to work from home, as many of us are, maybe it's, put through an email to your CSR team and say, what are some of the projects that the company is working on? How can I as an individual help? And if you're in an SME, many of which don't have a formal CSR team, formal CSR campaigns, maybe it's time to put up your hand and say, let's do something. Let's do something about the youth. Let's do something about education as a company, and give our skills, give our time, and give our money. I think those are some of the ideas that we'd love to leave you with. So we're a little bit over time. I want to give Taryn maybe just a minute to give some closing thoughts, Chris as well, and then we'll pray and call it a night. Over to you, Taryn.
Great, thank you. No, it's just a pleasure to be on the forum and to be able to engage your audience and to be able to just encourage everyone just to remember that it really is about what you have in your hands, and just to change your mindset about social justice, about your role as a business leader, your role as a Christian, your role in society as a whole. And when we start doing that, we'll start seeing there's so many more opportunities in which we can get involved, and a different way that we can view our worlds. So that's just what my encouragement is to everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Taryn. Chris?
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I just want to echo what Taryn said. I've always believed that, when we walk this path, we do need to consider those around us that are less fortunate and do what we can. There's a term that I've heard a lot that the non-poor need to help the poor. I just want to encourage those that have perhaps thought that social justice is something that maybe we should avoid, to say, get your hands dirty and you'll just be amazed what God can do through you. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for the team in the back. I am going to close in prayer. And before doing that, invite you to join us again in 2 weeks' time on the 19th of October. And I know that there are meetings happening in kind of smaller marketplace chapters. The Reimsig chapter, we're meeting on the 10th of October. So looking forward to that meeting this coming Saturday. Thank you so much, everybody. Let me close for us in prayer. Father, thank you that you've called us to both evangelism and social justice. And this is the full gospel. This is the full kingdom. And Lord, we pray that you might inspire us, that you might grow us in this area, that you might teach us. Holy Spirit, we seal all that's been said tonight, all the work that's been stirred up in our hearts, and pray that you would take us from glory to glory in this area, in Jesus' name. Amen. Taryn, Chris, Dorian, Dave at the back, and everyone else. Charles, thank you so much, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you all. Have a good night, and we will chat soon.
Thank you.
Good night.
Cheers.